Happy Thursday, Thrivers. Welcome back to another incredible guest episode on the Thriving Equine Professional. I am so excited to have a complete legend with us today. Dr. Debbie Spike Pierce, you are what I call wife, mom, boss. And I am so excited for our listeners to get to hear your story and some of the advice that you have for our next generation of leaders in and around the equine industry, because your story is incredible. And my guess is when you came to Rood Riddle as an intern, you did not have the goal written down that you would become the CEO of Rood Riddle Equine Hospital 25 or 30 years later. And so I am so excited for our listeners to get to hear this story of how your career has evolved so successfully at the same time that you have been a leader in your life as a partner, a mom, a wife, all the things. So welcome to the Thriving Equine Professional, and thank you for taking time to be with us today, Dr. Debbie Spike Pierce.
Thank you, Jodi. That was quite the introduction. And I really appreciate you giving me the chance to speak, because I do have a unique story. But you know what? Everybody has a unique story. And I would like to share just how I got to where I am and steps along the way that, things that helped me get there. So I'll start out just by, I grew up with a horse crazy kid, like many of us, but I actually grew up with dairy cows. I had jerseys, and that's what I got to show. For my 9th birthday, I got a calf, because when you are 9, you get to start 4-H. And I guess I told my mom, I really wanted a horse, and what I got was a calf. So I showed jersey cows, but my family did have horses. We had standardbred race horses. My father was a veterinarian, and I grew up around a lot of horses, but I didn't have a riding horse, and that's all I wanted. And I finally got my first horse when I was 15 and started showing. I remember driving myself to the truck and trailer to my first show. I had a Morgan that I showed saddle seat, and, just absolutely loved it. I always knew I wanted to be a veterinarian. It was probably, at the ages of 9, 10 when I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and wanted to do this.
You are a third generation. So you mentioned your father, but your grandfather also.
Yes. My grandpa also, he only did cattle, but that was what was more prominent in that time. And my dad actually did cattle as well, about 50-50 until I was in high school. And then he was 100% horses. So okay. Mixed animal practitioner, solo practitioner. They both were solo practitioners. And I think that's a little bit why my dad would say, "You sure you want to do this?" And I would say, "Absolutely." And he'd be like, "Okay." So, they let me do what I wanted to.
I love it. And you were in Michigan. You grew up in Michigan. And so you made that decision, and off you go for your DVM at Michigan State.
Yes. So I went to Michigan State for undergrad, and actually I applied for vet school after my second year, and much to my surprise, I got in. So I only went 2 years undergrad, and then I went on to veterinary school. And probably one unique thing about me in veterinary school was I cheered for football and basketball at Michigan State.
That's impressive.
It was different. I tried out I don't remember if it was my freshman or sophomore year, and I didn't make the team. So this is one of my many things that, you didn't get what you wanted, and then you just keep going. But I had a call from a friend when I was in vet school, and they're like, "Hey, you want to try out again?" And I was like, "Ooh, I'm in vet school." So I asked the college and my professors and said, "Would you guys support this?" And they did. And what's great about Big Ten is we didn't travel much, which that could be good, that could be bad, but it worked out very well for me. And so I cheered my junior and senior year of veterinary school.
Wow. Okay, that I have to tell you, I didn't know that about you. But now it puts all of those little pieces in place. You have 2 amazing daughters who are stars in their own right. One horseback and one is a dancer. And so now the whole picture comes together for me of where Vivian and Audra got their talents. They both came from you.
Yes, no, absolutely. But was really neat. You talk about in your next gen meeting so much about networking. And I have to say, cheerleading was fantastic for that. Part of the job of the cheerleaders are to meet with the alumni before games and have luncheons and dinner meetings and entertain people. And I met so many people and had so many job offers before I ever got out of vet school because of cheering and meeting a lot of different people. So it was incredible, but that's also what really shaped what I'm doing now, because we had 4 weeks for an externship our senior year, but I couldn't do that till after the NCAA tournament because I couldn't be gone for a month. So I chose to come down to Lexington, and I just called and I said, can I come down to Rood and Riddle and extern with you all in the month of April? And they said, well, you can come, but you can't do an internship because we've already chosen interns. And I said, that's okay. I don't want to do an internship. I just want to do my externship with you all. And so I did my externship, and that was the month of April. And then I graduated right after I came back. But my intention was always to practice with my dad. And
Right.
and I loved the standardbred racehorses, and that's what I was going to do.
Okay, so
So
you were going to come back to, you never intended to leave Michigan. You were going to be in Michigan and you were going to practice veterinary medicine with your father.
yes, that was always the plan. And then when I came down here for a month, I learned so much. And I think that's really the key about taking opportunities is, go different places, meet different people, see different practices, because I learned so much in that month. All I could think about after I left was, wow, if I did an internship, think of how much I could learn in an entire year. And so that's what really, put me thinking that, do I want to go back and do an internship? So I went into practice when I graduated. I think my dad had me working till about midnight the day of my graduation, because he would say to all of his clients, no, Deb graduates on Saturday. Let's just wait for her. I mean, total classic, dad just putting everything off, let his daughter do the work until,
Right.
when
The
she.
succession plan was in
Oh,
place.
yeah. Yep. So I did that, and I loved practice, and I loved practicing in Michigan. I loved the standardbred racehorses, but I really still wanted that internship experience, which I never thought I wanted until I externed. And so I applied for an internship in December of that year, and then to start in May. So I practiced 1 year in Michigan, and then I came down to do an internship at Rood and Riddle. And I told all my clients in Michigan, I said, I'll be back next year. And almost every single one of them said, no, you won't. And they were right. I didn't think they would be right, but they were right. I was set that I was just going to go learn as much as I could for a year and come back.
And so how did that happen, right? Like internships, we talk a lot about that, and we almost have young people, Dr. Spike, a little bit fearful of the internship experience. And so the impact of that for your life and your evolution in your career was incredible.
I wouldn't have gone out of Michigan. I wouldn't have left home. I wouldn't have experienced really practicing from so many different people. And I think that was really the key for me is everybody does things a little bit differently, and you can learn so much from other people. And coming down here, just the sheer volume as well was tremendous, and the expertise, the expertise that you learn here, you're listening to someone that has done this for 20 years and are at the top of their game. And the other thing what I really learned was listening to how people talk to their clients. I mean, really learning that communication portion. And you learn it from so many different ways. You can learn it from, an internal medicine specialist who has this sick and dying foal, to be honest, and how they communicate that. Or a lameness where a horse is up against a big race. How do they communicate what this horse has and whether or not they're going to be able to race in this really big race, which is coming up, which is very important for the owner. So it is just, it was so incredible. And I think it's so valuable. And I wouldn't have been where I am today. And actually, a lot of times when you're doing an internship, you think, I want to do what that person's doing. So here I had intended on going back home, and I was at the end of my halfway through my internship, I wanted to apply for a surgical residency. So wow. That's what I did. I applied for a surgical residency with all my intern mates. We all applied somewhere except for one. One went into private practice. but I didn't get a surgical residency. So then I was up, okay, now what am I going to do? And I knew at that point, I just really didn't want to go back home because I knew there was so much more out there and things I wanted to do. So when I didn't get one, I'd gotten a job with a local practitioner, and Dr. Bramlett came to me one day and just said, hey, instead of working for so-and-so, how about you work for me? I was like, sold.
Sold.
I mean, that was, yes, I loved his practice. I loved racehorses because that was one thing I grew up around. Now, I'd never been around thoroughbreds. I hadn't touched a thoroughbred before I came to Kentucky. And it really is they are different horses. They act very differently than the standardbreds, and they have different issues. You know, some are similar, but many are different. So that was just a fantastic opportunity. And so I took that with the intention of applying the next year. So I changed my mind all the time.
Right. So with the intention of applying for another surgical residency next year,
Correct.
that was still in your mind. Okay.
That was still in my mind until I got to the point where you're about to put in your applications. And I was like, I love what I'm doing. I don't see me wanting to do surgery every day. I love the lameness. I love going out on farm calls and speaking with people. So I decided not to apply. And then I stayed with Dr. Bramlett for 3 years as his assistant. And by that time, I had developed some of my own clientele as well. And then I joined the ambulatory team 3 years later.
And that's incredible, right? To go through a couple of years working with Dr. Bramlett. And then I want to ask about kind of your specialization because, I used the word legend early on, but any repository that any of us in the industry walk into in this town, like Dr. Debbie Spike Pierce is in the repository. That was your space. That was your, like real realm of the world. And so how did that kind of come about? Because it became your specialty, your gift.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a good story as well. So when the repository started, I was working with Dr. Bramlett at the time, and we really didn't have a practitioner that could just go out to the sale and interpret radiographs and give the results back to the other veterinarians working. And we just didn't have that. So Dr. Bramlett decided, well, Debbie, you could do that. And I'm like, no, I can't. I mean, that were my exact words. No, I can't. And he said, yes, you can. If you have any questions, just call me. Like literally, that was it. It's like, okay.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
Confidence. Yeah, he had confidence in me. He knew I knew what we saw. We were doing surgeries on yearlings. And so I knew the developmental orthopedic diseases, and we looked at racehorses. So I also knew the racehorse injuries and what we were doing surgeries on. So, and treating lamenesses. So I did have that all, but I didn't really think I had the ability to do that. But again, that's someone building you up.
Yes. And so important. But I also want to take a step back. I always try and remind myself that, especially in our industry, and we've got many young listeners, can you explain the repository for our listeners to understand exactly what we're talking about?
Yeah, certainly. So at what the repository is, it's a place where radiographs are housed that veterinarians, when they're looking at a horse from a purchase standpoint, can look at a full set of radiographs that were taken within 3 weeks, typically, of the sale and give their opinion. Before the repository, people would buy horses, they would bid on horses, and then they would x-ray them after they bought them, which, that's you can imagine the things that would come up after you purchase this horse for a lot of money. Yeah. And they might have issues. And then they would go back to the sales and say, hey, I want such and such offers, or just basically, I don't want this horse. So then there would be this arbitration, and it was kind of messy, to be honest. So what they started was the repository where they had the radiographs. They also had videoscopes initially, and now we're full swing back to the videoscopes, but that where people can view more horses. And what is nice about it is I think it really increased the free market, the ability for people to confidently bid on horses and stand behind what they were bidding on. You can imagine if you don't know in the end what you're going to have, and you might not spend $1 million, maybe right. You're going to spend 750. It's all of a risk benefit, but it really gives the client the ability to really know more about the horse prior to bidding. And that's what the repository is.
Right. And so I like to make sure we use a lot of acronyms, right? Acronyms, and we use these words. So I like to make sure we explain that to our listeners. But I think that's a really important part of what you started doing and then what you became. But let's jump back a little bit there to the importance of someone like, at that point, a Dr. Bramlage, who championed you. You and I both kind of use that word, cheerleader or champion, of someone who has every ability, but as I will say, I don't know how to do that yet. And so when we remind ourselves that I just don't know how to do that yet, it's an opportunity for us to upskill and become better at what we're doing.
Absolutely. And I think when people are confident in you, that helps you. It makes you become more confident in yourself, especially, in something like this. Dr. Bramlage would always say to me, whatever you find out what you really love and then become very good at it. And that's what my goal was. I mean, at that point, I loved reading films, and it was so interesting to me. And I wanted to be the best. And at that time, no one had really sat down and just read survey after survey of horses. So I was on the front end of that, just as everybody else was. And because of the volume of things I had seen, I did get asked a lot. And also what this led to is research. So that's something I've done over the year, is really look at these different issues and let's see what happens. How do these horses race? And at that time, yes, I developed some expertise and was able to hang my hat on that this is what I do, and this is what I'm good at.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I hadn't even really thought about that. I mean, you've published some research that has gone on for years, like so valuable, right? That you've been able to really kind of keep up with from beginning through career on what you're seeing and what you're able to share for the benefit of the industry.
Correct. And honestly, that's what we also have our interns do. So part of an internship, at least when I started, was also having a project. So we would look at, some kind of problem, collect data, and then look at the data, get a statistician involved, and then hopefully report that to AEP, do an abstract, something like that. And then the goal would always be to publish it. And I have to say, I only have one publication of my own completely. And that was the one on sesamoiditis, which at the time was the most common and the most confusing radiographic finding in the yearling horse. And honestly, it kind of still is, but at least we have more information out there and how they perform, and helps people to place a value on an animal when they're bidding and, interested in purchasing a horse.
Yeah. Now that brings up a question that I always like to dig into. Again, you are the president and CEO of one of the largest equine clinics in the world. And so you have an entire team of people. It is not just veterinarians. So to your point, you just mentioned a few of the other people who would be involved, whether that's involved in your day-to-day operations from a veterinary perspective or from a research perspective. Let's talk about a little bit of your team and the roles that you have in and around Rood and Riddle.
Oh my goodness, there's so many. I mean, it's kind of endless. You have the veterinarians, but none of us can do what we do without somebody else, to be honest. Just from a personal standpoint, as being an ambulatory practitioner, I relied so heavily on my technician or veterinary assistant at the time. I mean, I would ask them, okay, am I done for the day? Can I go home? Do I need to do anything else? And they would be, yes, you may, or no, you may not. And I really appreciated that, but that they do everything for you. They assist. A veterinary assistant is so important, or technician. And in the fact that they think ahead of you and help you. They just make your day smoother, easier, more efficient. And then in the end, you're more productive, which, I mean, many of us are paid on production. So that was also very nice and important. So the nursing staff, the technicians, the assistants are extremely important. In a hospital like this, we have admissions teams, like people that go and greet you and your horse at your trailer and bring them into the hospital and determine where they're going to go and help get them ready to go home and meet you again when you pick up the horse. We have barn staff, which are the people that take care of these horses and, clean the stalls, but also groom them and just make sure everything's just right for them. Whether it's them measuring the amount of straw in the stall to, making sure they always have water and feed and whatnot. But it's pretty exciting for many of them when you see that some of the horses that come in.
Yeah.
And I have to, I just think it's so cool that the horses that you do get to see or meet or know when they're in the hospital, I usually don't know who's in here, but I have to say, even some of my accounting staff knows, where they'll say, "Hey, did you see so-and-so's in here?" I'm like, "No, I did not." Or I have one in particular. She lets me know anytime I have one of our own horses. My husband and I have a thoroughbred farm. And she's like, "I really like that foal you have in here today." And I was like, "I have a foal in here today." I don't always know. That's my husband does that, and he doesn't always share what's going on, but that's okay.
Right.
I have stuff to do, and he takes care of the farm stuff. But people really have a vested interest, and it could be someone in billing or in accounting, not necessarily someone that's getting to work and touch the horse. So just incredible. And there's so many opportunities to learn as well, because you have diagnostic imaging that you're doing and performing between CTs, MRIs, radiographs, ultrasounds. And those are things you get to see.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. It's incredible what the different things you can learn here.
I want to share that because, again, so many of our listeners, we spend our undergraduate career thinking about 2 or 3 things that we could do. Well, I want to be a veterinarian, or I want to be a technician, or I want to work in industry, but there are so many roles. And you said, find out what you love and be great at it. And if someone starts to really develop a passion for financial roles like billing and accounting or marketing or human resources, you can still step into this industry and be a part of what's going on, to your point, with those other roles other than a veterinarian or a veterinary technician. So I love to just share the size and the scope. About how many employees do you have at Rood Riddle? You have 3 campuses now. You are in Saratoga Springs, New York. You're in Wellington, Florida, and you've got home base here in Lexington, Kentucky. How many employees?
We have 350 in Lexington, 60 in Saratoga, and 50 in Wellington.
Wow.
So,
I mean, so listeners, I want you to hear the size and the scope of the opportunity in and around these equine careers, because, while you have 350 in Lexington, how many of those are veterinarians? About
62.
Right now. 62. I should know the exact number. I don't need to say about, right? You're like,
yeah, no, and that may have changed. I want to say 62, but it could be closer to 65 now. But we have 92 veterinarians altogether between the 3 practices. So our support staff, there's a lot more of our support staff than there are veterinarians, and they're crucial, absolutely crucial to everything we do. And honestly, people that have an interest in horses makes a difference. It really does. You can do the job, but to have a job that you can also, you can be proud of any job, but when you can follow what horses are doing or see horses and see all different kinds of horses and what you've done for them, it's incredible. There's nothing like it.
Yes. Yeah, without a doubt. And it is just like you're talking about the support staff that are, you never want it to get routine. And it's in Lexington, you've already talked about the standard of care, the standard of excellence, and then to be on campus when, some certain horse that everyone knows the name of rolls in and is there, it's a palpable excitement. It really does make what we're doing every day so rich and meaningful. And at the end of the day, when you're able to say, "Ooh, guess who I got to, see today?" I always will say, I have zero interest in Hollywood celebrities, but let me tell you about the horses that I'm like, well, I got to touch his butt.
Well, the minis or the cute little paints, or they all get just as much oohs and ahs, trust me. Yeah. Or the big huge draft horses. It's incredible what you see. And they're, I don't know, you could be walking across the parking lot and say, "Ooh, who's that?"
Yeah.
It's right? It's fun.
It is.
Yep,
it is fun. So, your evolution from intern to ambulatory practitioner, let's now dig into you are not pretty recently, but what is it, about 5 years now that you are not practicing as you stepped into the role of president and CEO? Let's talk a little bit about that evolution.
Yes, that was one I couldn't say I expected or sought out. It wasn't something I was looking for even. So when Dr. Rood, when he said he was going to retire, and he said, I'm going to retire in 3 years, and we decided, okay, what do we want to do? I think it's very important for a veterinarian to be in that role because you do make decisions based on veterinary medicine, and I would still want it to be based on that. It's not financial. It's not, what's I want to say best for the business, but it's what's best for the horse, which is what's best for the business. And so we had several people that said, oh, I would like to do that. And we had a few that, were of the age that maybe it didn't quite make sense for them to follow in Dr. Rood's footsteps, just because they would be at retirement age, not too far behind him. And I was speaking with my husband one night, and he was one of them that was kind of thinking, okay, this is something I could do. And I was speaking with him, and I'm like, well, he said, yeah, but I'm going to be retiring before too long after Bill. And so I said, well, maybe I should try to do this. And he's like, that's a great idea. And that's when I bit my tongue. I'm like, what did I just say? I was thinking this is something I could do, but that it scared me to death to think that maybe you should do this. And so we talked about it, and we went through an interview process with our shareholders. And I mean, I love this place, and I think it's, at my heart and soul, I grew up here, and I really wanted to see it continue in the same way and to help people throughout their careers. I am very much a people person, and helping people is also very important to me, as well as see the business grow. I didn't have the business acumen to do this. I did go and get my MBA once I was selected, and that has helped a lot. And it still comes down to the people I think in everything that we do from a management perspective. And so I was selected and got my MBA and started in January 1 of 2018. And Dr. Rood came in every day for the first year.
Well, I was going to say, I don't want to diminish that process, because you talk about getting your MBA, and I was around enough then. I mean, my goodness, it was so intense for you. Again, I go back to what I said at the beginning. You're a wife and a mom, and you were an ambulatory practitioner that was extremely busy, but then you took on CEO role and going to school for your MBA. There was so much on your plate at that time. And so I really want to celebrate that process that you went through, because that was a tremendous amount of sacrifice on your part. And I think that the respect that goes into that, and I'll pull back to what you said, you were scared to death. And it makes me think of, one of those quotes that's out there that says, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. And if that wasn't a really beautiful example of, your evolution since 2017 or 18 till now, of what you sacrificed, what your, family supported you through, that was pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, it was, I don't remember it. I mean, that's how I think how stressful it was at the time, but I don't. I just remember when I was done, my kids were like, we're going to get a home cooked meal. I mean, and it was real, and things have changed. It was nice to be able to do this online, and I would just take my laptop wherever I went. I'd be waiting at ballet, be taking girls to ballet, sitting there for, 2 or 3 hours, and I would just do schoolwork. And so it was really time management, which I think is so much of what we do throughout our careers. And, I hear people say, don't become an equine vet because you won't be able to ride. I think that's crazy. It's absolutely just your time management and what you want to do. And I wanted to get my MBA, and I wanted to do well. I have to say in vet school, I probably wasn't the most academically inclined. I mean, I was very busy then as well. And this was my time to say, okay, I can do this. I want to see how well I can do as well, kind of challenge myself because I knew that I needed an education on this. I needed the help, and it was a big deal
Yeah.
to go into this role and not having, basically a business background. So
Yes.
it was
And
it was important.
we talk a lot about that. Even you recently attended the Lexington, Kentucky Next Gen Equine Vet Med, and we heard those questions from students and the conversations from those sitting veterinarians on the panel, the importance of business acumen and some portion of our education being business minded. So whether we are going forward to become veterinarians or technicians or industry leaders in any way, the financial acumen and the business acumen really is so critical and crucial to our success and our ability really to kind of rise to the next level in whatever role we're doing.
I agree, and it's also something that just helps you in general practice. Do you have to have an MBA? Absolutely not to practice, but just to know, just from a basic business sense, do you need to raise your fees? Are you covering your costs? Things like that, because veterinarians have been notorious for not charging appropriately over the years. I do think that's changed a lot recently, but those are things that you need to be able to look at, just determine, okay, what am I spending, and am I, able to make enough to make enough to keep going, and can I support other people
Yeah.
in the practice as well? So simple things are also important. So when you're in a group, I think the business side of it is done for you, which is kind of where I was. Dr. Rood handled all the business stuff. All I had to do was practice veterinary medicine, which
Yes.
was great. That was wonderful at the time. And, tides have turned. So now I'm
Right.
having to do, but it's important to know just the basic information on business.
Yes. Yeah, without a doubt. So before we switch gears a little bit, and while we're still talking about your veterinary career, you are similar to me, just so passionate about our young people. And so I think this is a great time for you to talk about, because you've demonstrated the evolution of your career, but the perceived barriers in today's world. We know that we're fighting this battle and this perception in the industry of don't pursue veterinary medicine equine, right? Like, so we're hearing that, and you made mention of that. So talk about why you do feel that we need to be the cheerleaders, and why some of those perceptions are misperceptions that are out there currently, because, clearly you have set the example of what it takes to be a leader, and also, kind of have what I call a life beyond that. You have a family, and you are actively involved beyond veterinary medicine in the community and committees, etc. So what are those perceived barriers, and what are your comments on that?
Well, this is so important to me. I'm very passionate on it because I love what I do. I've loved what I've done my whole career. And I think it's so, it hurts me when I hear something negative come through. I just remember being at a pony club meeting, and one of the adults there said, well, no reason to even try to go to vet school. You'll never get in. And, these people are, the kids are 8 to 12. That's not the message I think they need to hear. I mean, I think at that time it's, anything is possible. You might have to work really hard, and you might have to, you do have to get good grades in some instances, maybe not in everything, but maybe you have to take a class over. That's something that your next gen people talked about, was that, there might be, if grades are limiting you, maybe you do take something over. So I don't want people to be discouraged at a young age, because that is when people are really interested in
Yeah.
becoming a veterinarian, is that kind of 8 to 12 year old pony clubber that I would see. We did a tour of Rood Riddle, and I asked, how many of you want to be equine veterinarians? Every single one of them raised their hand. And so I think it's really important, one, to be encouraging in that way, that yes, you can do this. May you need help along the way? Absolutely. But there's help out there to get you through this. And there's a lot of recommendations for, how to apply, when to apply. And we heard a lot of different recommendations at your next gen. And that is really useful as well. I learned a lot in that. I have a daughter who's going into college next year and she wants to be an equine veterinarian. And I'm very supportive because it's a great profession.
Yeah.
And she has had people tell her, well, don't become an equine vet, become a small animal vet, because then you'll have time to ride. And that is just not true. You can plan accordingly. It's all in your priorities and what you want to do and time management. And honestly, the schedules have become much better for equine veterinarians. We're seeing many 4-day work weeks work for practices. We're not doing that yet in this area, but we have some people that are not the normal 7 days a week during breeding season. And so it is evolving, and it's evolving the right direction, and it's working, and people don't, it's amazing. There's a lot of data out there to support that, when you're working too much, you're less productive.
Yes.
And we see that in these practices that are going to 4 day work weeks, they're just as productive. Yes. Now you have to have people, in order to rotate and be able to do that, but it's definitely out there.
Yeah. I wanted to hear that, as I say, straight from the horse's mouth, right? Because I do believe that the conversations that continue to happen today are positive and productive. And that's exactly what our listeners are hungry for is, oh, okay, well, they're in a room where they're hearing negativity and discouragement. And I'm quick to say, you're in the wrong room with the wrong people. Let me help you find the right people, because we want them to hear reality, but encouragement and championing them and cheerleading them is the right way to do that. So certainly a great example from you.
And I think there's also, it used to be like, I'm 31 years out of school, which I cannot believe. That shocks me when I say that. But there, people ask me, well, has it been difficult being a woman? Absolutely not. I was 5 foot tall and 100 pounds when I started practice, and it just isn't an issue. I do think horsemanship is very important. Yeah. And I think it's important to get a lot of experience, because that's the one thing when I was in practice initially, and I might have a trainer that thought, oh, here's this little lady, how's she going to do this? And once you can demonstrate that, your way around a horse, you're very good with horses, and then your knowledge base, they're like, okay. And they understand and they respect that. So I think we're past that problem that used to be in practice, where you could get a little bit of a negative connotation, but there's so many women in equine practice now and doing extremely well and thriving.
And thriving. I love to hear that from you. Fabulous. Now, I do want to have time to talk about your involvement, because that is hugely important. So not only personally, but also Rood and Riddle as a brand is so involved in the industry, but you specifically, Dr. Spike Pierce, have been the past president of KAEP, Kentucky Equine Practitioners, and you've been past president of KVMA, Kentucky Veterinary Medical Association. You've been on multiple committees, leadership and student relations and membership. Talk to us about the involvement you have in the industry and why that is important. How has that contributed to your career, your success? And what would you say to young people coming into our industry about the organizations that they can be involved with, like AAEP or student chapters or their VMAs? Tell us a little bit about your experience.
So I think for me, a lot of that started with mentorship. So Dr. Bramlage was my mentor, I have so many mentors, but he was one of my main mentors, and he was very involved in organized veterinary medicine. So he started the ball rolling for me and said, hey, you should get involved. And then it is a little bit of, when you go to these meetings, being involved. So being at committee meetings, letting people know you want to be involved, because if you don't speak up, they don't really know. And I remember going to one of my first KAP meetings and telling them, hey, I would really like to be involved here. And the next year they said, okay, do you want to be on the board? And absolutely. So I think it is really putting yourself out there, but then you have to commit as well. So when you are on committees, or if you are on a board, you need to be committed to being at the meetings and being productive. So when they're asking for something to be reviewed or something to be done, do it and get involved and give them something back to say, hey, this person was a really good committee member. This person really went above and beyond. That kind of puts you into the next phase of it. But I love organized veterinary medicine. One, it's very important, but two, you get to meet so many people. I mean, there are so many colleagues that from around the United States, and where I met them was through AEP. It really was, and going to committee meetings, because you work with people one-on-one, and just going to, continuing education, you'll meet a lot of different people. And, we all have something in common, which makes it really cool because you always have something to talk about. It's not an awkward or odd conversation to go and say, hey, where are you practice? Where are you from? And
Right.
what exactly do you do? And it's an easy conversation to have. And I don't know, we have a group of friendly people, I think,
Yes.
as a profession. It's really a very good profession to be part of and network, and people are kind.
Yes. People are kind, and we're genuinely passionate about the horse, right? And so whatever differences exist, there's so much passion to be shared, to your point. And so on that note, I do want to ask you the question, because we have changed so much, especially the past 5 years, just the in-person versus the virtual. And so you mentioned the power of connections, and I want to encourage our students the power of in-person connections, right? When they have the opportunity. We do spend a lot of time virtually now, but there is a difference, I think, that as they move through the student to professional transition and pursue careers in and around equine or veterinary medicine, the importance of being connected live with people who have the potential to be mentors, who are ahead of where they are in school, in the industry, etc. So I want to ask you specifically.
Well, for me, in person is just so important. And the reason you can get continuing education online. Absolutely. Can you learn something from a lecture? No problem. But what you don't have is that personal connection. And that to me was so important. I learned that from my dad. When he would go to meetings, he would say he learned this and this and this. And it was not made necessarily in a lecture. It was usually talking to another practitioner and saying, oh, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? So just the one-on-ones that you can have at in-person continuing education meetings, I think are huge. And then being involved in organized veterinary medicine as well will allow that. But I don't particularly like Zoom meetings. I don't feel like you get enough out of it. And oftentimes there's also that temptation to do something else while you're doing it. And I think that's also, unless you put your full attention to something and really put yourself out there, you don't get as much as you would. So I'm definitely an in-person person.
Yes.
And I think it's extremely important. Also, it gives you the skills that you need to be speaking with clients. If you're just doing everything from a virtual way, veterinary medicine is not virtual.
Yes.
It's not. You need to touch the horse. You need to be able to speak with a client and see how they're saying things. I mean, a lot of it is our compassion and our empathy for people and what they're going through. And unless you're able to have that conversation and look somebody in the eye and be able to say, okay, this is where we are. These are your options. What would you like to do? And they might ask you, what would you like to do?
Right.
And that's also important, that you know what you would do and what you think is best. And those are really in-person discussions to me.
Yeah, without a doubt. So let's transition straight into an in-person opportunity that you all at Rood Riddle have championed, and we'll be having the second recoming of opportunities in equine practice. So the OEPS. Talk to us a little bit about OEPS and how that has come back in 2023 and what the plans are for 2024. What is it and why?
So opportunities in equine practice. This is really to just let everybody know that's in vet school, because we know the message isn't always positive about equine medicine. Maybe it was when you were younger, maybe it's in vet school, maybe it was an undergrad, but the message, it doesn't always give you the opportunity to really see what's out there in equine veterinary medicine. And that's the other thing about equine veterinary medicine. It is so diverse in what you can do. So the goal of this meeting, and this was started by, it was actually the brainchild of Dr. Rood and Andy Clark, Dr. Andy Clark. He was at Hager's. Dr. Rood was obviously here at Rood and Riddle. And they're like, let's let people know what we do. And so what we do is we bring, this is supported by veterinarians throughout the country and industry which is so important, because what we do is we bring third-year veterinary students to Lexington, Kentucky, and give them lectures from practitioners of all different areas. So it's opportunity in dentistry, opportunity in surgery, opportunity in research, all of this from an equine perspective. And so you hear all these lectures, but then we've started this go around with these wet labs where you come and actually get some hands-on and some experience. But the most important part of it all is just getting to know all the other students that are there, as well as practitioners. Maybe you're going to meet somebody to say, hey, I would love to extern with you. You're only 3 hours from me. That would be awesome. And you can make that connection with someone and then have a plan of what you're going to do. But it's really about networking and then learning the business. And of course, we show off Lexington, Kentucky, because Lexington is absolutely beautiful and in such an incredible place to be around the horses. But I have to say, when I was a student, I only visited Lexington. And then in practice, I visited a lot of other places. And there's a lot of really cool places out there. There really are. I mean, this is where I ended up. But, if I had gone and visited Virginia, Virginia was incredible.
Right.
There's just so many great places. As long as there's a horse there, it's a good place.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good. And you and I know we could just continue this. It'd be really nice to be having like a steak dinner with a bottle of wine between us. But as we wrap up, Dr. Debbie Spike Pierce, what are your final words of advice for young people, that anything else you would add for our listeners as they are early in their career and looking at all the opportunities that are out there, as they are undergraduates, perhaps making the student to professional transition? What would you say to our listeners today as we wrap up? You've shared so much wisdom.
I would just want to be the cheerleader. So if you want to be an equine practitioner, do anything you can to get there, because it is a fabulous profession and I love it. I think you will love it as well. And you can make it whatever you want it to be. I never thought that I would be I'm in management and I'm a CEO now. That's not at all what I had envisioned. So things can change. Learn from your mentors, get your mentors, because they're out there. It could be anyone. It could be Jodi. She can be your mentor and she's definitely your cheerleader right now. And I just make the most of it because it is a wonderful profession, very rewarding, both from time financially, and I'm a third generation and I think I'm going to have a fourth generation underneath me.
Yes, we're going to be cheering for Vivian in that endeavor for sure. I can't believe that it's time for her to go to college and start looking at those options and opportunities. But yes, so much excitement, so much wisdom. One of the things that I wrote down that you said was go places. I loved that. It's just two simple words, go places. So go experience life, go take advantage of all the opportunities, and just the importance of finding what you love and getting great at it. That, what a takeaway you have there. You said the words that anything is possible, putting yourself out there, be committed and be productive. So Dr. Spike, just tremendous experiences, tremendous wisdom. We want to tell all of our listeners, come visit Lexington, come visit Rood and Riddle, come take a tour. So Rood and Riddle Equine Hospital, they can find you on the web and all the socials. Anything else as far as what you would say to contact or come visit or learn more?
Yes, absolutely. Just you can find me on the website, call Rood and Riddle. I'm happy to take anybody around, but just, if this is what you want to do, I strongly encourage it. It's wonderful. It's a great opportunity and I couldn't be happier with what I do. And thanks, Jodi, for the opportunity to let you guys know that, because I think a lot of times people don't always have this positive attitude towards veterinary medicine or equine veterinary medicine, but I do. And I
Yes.
hope you do.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you so much taking time to be with us today and share your story. And I know there could be a chapter 2 to this, so we might have to have you as a return guest on the Thriving Equine Professional. So, Dr. Spike, thank you so much. Listeners, we will see you back here, same time next week. With that, have an amazing day. Cheers.
And have fun.